Okay, hey, welcome to an episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have another cool update for you guys from the brand Baltic. A little about them. They're a French micro brand aiming to offer timeless pieces of the highest quality for fair prices. Each piece is designed, assembled, and adjusted in France. And in terms of the type of watch, this is a dive watch. Some key common characteristics and design when you're looking for a diver. Of course, you're going to find water resistance, typically paired to some type of screw down crown. You want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver extension is always nice if on bracelet. This is their Aquascaphe Mk2 in the blue colorway, and this is not its first time on my channel, but I have another update for you guys. But overall, the Aquascaphe Mk2, they're looking at this with years of hindsight, refined taste, and technical evolutions have been shaping Baltic's future. They're introducing the Aquascaphe in its most refined form. Every component has been upgraded to deliver a more advanced, desirable, and technically improved version of their iconic watch while preserving the original spirit. It's also available in a smaller 37mm size as well. This is going to be their quote-unquote 39.5, but that's actually at the bezel. At the case, it's still just 38mm. So really nice wearing watch. Definitely leans more into, of course, the vintage inspired. But as you guys can see, there's a lot of modern niceties and upgrades here. Now, in terms of price wise, this is going to go for €695, which turns out to be roughly about $800 depending on when you check, based off of the conversion rates currently, and that is on the Beads of Rice bracelet. But here we actually have it on their brand new rubber strap, which is going to be €630 direct, which is about $725. So you can save a good amount of money by opting for this rubber strap. So I did want to focus on the rubber strap and what it brings to the table. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, so aesthetically, quite handsome on this rubber strap. But before we dive into that, I did want to briefly go over the bracelet. It does have quick release spring bars as well as screw pin construction, which has been updated from the previous variation. But other than that, it's definitely meant to be a bit more vintage inspired. I think it looks great. It wears really well. But today we're going to focus on this strap, which is very impressive, especially if you guys are fans of the channel. You guys know I kind of go crazy for rubber straps, particularly tropic styles. And what this does here is it really creates something interesting because it has like a tropical style pattern in terms of the perforations here, but it actually has a Saffiano leather texture, which I really, really enjoy. If you guys are fans of the channel, Saffiano leather is kind of one of my leather textures of choice, whether it be for a watch roll or even a strap to wear. I think it's very good looking. And then of course on the underside, very nice. And of course, when it's not on the Beads of Rice bracelet, it just gives it overall a more kind of old school skin diver aesthetic. Not to say that the Beads of Rice doesn't do that. I think, again, it looks great on the Beads of Rice, and that's typically how I wear it. But something about this strap, I have to say, I'm very impressed, especially when you figure that technically you're saving, about $75 by opting for the strap. And honestly, this is the type of strap that, I think about how expensive a rubber tropic style strap is, or tropic branded strap, which I love those. I've done a bunch of videos for those on my channel. This is up there. This is like comparable. It's not going to be quite as beefy in terms of the structure, in terms of the thickness up here closer to the ends of the strap. But I will say some people might prefer that, right? Because it's going to be a little bit more sleek, a little bit more pliable. So something to consider. But I mean, what do you guys think? I mean, aesthetically, I think this thing looks great. And I mean, you look at now it's very, very comparable to the latest tropic rubber straps, because you're going to have that very nice kind of IWC style buckle with the multiple finishes there to include satin brushing as well as that high polished bevel work. So very cool. And again, some of you might be here just for the watch because maybe you hadn't watched the other videos. I mean, I've reviewed this, of course, in kind of its original form on the Beads of Rice bracelet. And then I did do a follow-up kind of comparing it with the previous generation. And I had those paired onto Artem sailcloth straps, which are very expensive, but I thought really complemented this watch nicely. But I will say, ugh, I mean, who needs an aftermarket strap when you can save money for opting in to a really, really nice and well executed OEM strap? I really like this. So, getting into the watch, for those of you that might be here, again, first time seeing this Aquascaphe. Now, the Mark II, in terms of the diameter, like I mentioned, a 38 millimeters in diameter. That's across the case, and you can see there is a fair amount of overhang on the bezel. That overhang accounts for the 39.5 millimeters that they market this as. So visually it is going to be that wide, but I will say footprint wise it's going to be much smaller, which is nice, and ultimately going to make this more wearable. And they don't have to do any trick undercutting because that mid case is very thin already and quite, you know, striking in terms of its profile. So no extra tricks needed when you actually have a smaller footprint, again, at that 38 millimeter width. Now, in terms of the thickness, including the crystal, which I always want to include because it exists, is going to be 13 millimeters. And I know some people might think that's thick, but again, when you look at this, it doesn't really look, it looks very, very thin. And again, the visual weight of the crystal is not going to be that much, you know, in terms of anything that's going to make this feel top heavy. I think this looks really fantastic with that beautiful box dome sapphire with an inner AR coating. The crown is screw down and nicely signed, and now it has crown guards versus the original variation, which was more of kind of big crown styling. Now, in terms of the bezel action, 120 clicks, unidirectional, fully Lume sapphire insert, nice and clicky. Resistance is dialed up a little bit more than I would prefer. And I will say, if you rest it on the click, it's going to be slightly misaligned, at least in my particular example. But the nice thing is you can rock it forward to where it's going to have that perfect alignment. So nothing to worry about there. Let me give it just a quick little wipe because, of course, that glossy nature of the sapphire crystal as well as the sapphire bezel insert means it's going to pick up, you know, fingerprints. But the nice thing is it's going to recapture that beautiful Bakelite bezel styling, you know, from the days of old. Now, the movement inside, although you can't see it, is going to be your automatic Miota 9039 movement. It's a no-date movement, so there's going to be no ghost crown positioning there as you're pulling the crown out. It's just going to be one position. Essentially, you unscrew it and you can wind it, you pull it out, and then it's hacking. In terms of the power reserve, 42-hour power reserve, beating at 4 hertz or 28,800 vibrations per hour in terms of that beat rate. Although you can't see it, it does have a nice, you know, solid case back here, nicely etched, very clearly done. And then getting on to this beautiful glossy blue dial with applied 3 Lumicast indices and polished hands. You're going to have BGW9 Swiss Super Luminova, so that's going to have a very nice potent glow and also have a nice kind of daylight tinge to it. I think it looks quite nice, and I will say this dark blue strap is borderline anthracite gray. Like that's how, and I mean that in the best way. Like this looks really, really good and complements the watch really well. So although it matches, it's not matchy, which I really enjoy. Now, getting into the water resistance, guys, 200 meters of water resistance, so 20 atmospheres. You're going to have 20 millimeter lug width, which is going to be really great. Again, you can have the option for that solid beads of rice bracelet, which looks great. And if you want to see this on there, you can absolutely check the channel history for that. But we're going to really look at this, what they're calling the new design FKM rubber strap with that Saffiano leather texturing, which I think looks really fantastic. You get that tropic-like ventilation pattern there with all of the perforations so that, one, your wrist can breathe when you're out of the water, and when you're in the water can, you know, can make it through, and it's not going to be in between you and the strap. So it's going to be able to drain nicely and still keep good traction on your wrist. It has a nice taper here that you would expect, 20 millimeters down to about 16 millimeters, down to that beautiful Again, signed pin buckle there. It's actually signed on the underside. So less branding, and if you wanted to pick up one of these straps and put it on a non-Baltic watch, that's the nice thing too, is you absolutely have that option. And I think, again, the aesthetics on this are that pleasing. I could easily see this type of strap, especially the fact that it does come with quick release spring bars as well, nicely ventilated underside, and it just has a very versatile aesthetic to it, right? Like, we all do love a good tropic style strap, but again, this changes up the format a bit, while still keeping it quite, of course, classic. It does have a bit more of a contemporary silhouette to it, in terms of that execution, with that very different but still quite nice texturing that they've added, instead of that typical basket weave you might find on a more standard tropic style strap. So really, really nice. But with all that said, let's actually get this on the wrist and see how it wears. Okay, as you can see on my 7.5-inch wrist, or 19 centimeters in circumference, wears really well. Again, you do have that larger footprint thanks to the bezel, but with that smaller dial, those proportions with the indices pushed closer to the center thanks to those kind of outer tracks, I think it's really well balanced. Of course, if I get my wrist a bit too close to the camera lens, it's a fair amount of perspective distortion. The sides of my wrist fall off, out of view, and similarly, so does the ends of the strap. So what I'll do is keep my wrist nice and low, and look, you can see already the perspective is changed, and now it's nicely, it's more nicely centered there and everything. So I'll keep my wrist low, and then just tighten up the frame here so that you guys can get still a detailed look, but just add a bit of a truer aspect ratio as how this may lay on your own wrist. And check that out. Very nice, deep dark blue. I will say that out in the daylight, it does light up, but it never becomes cartoonish. So I do like this deep blue. It doesn't have any hints of purple, and it is a very true and deep navy blue. And I like that. Ooh, and look at this. Very thin profile, visually very well proportioned, extremely dialed in here in terms of that fit. And you can see even the mid case, it doesn't have a lot of slope on it. It's just ever so slight, but because of the ultimate, only 47 millimeter lug to lug length, and then how the fact that the lugs get a bit pointier here at the ends, you don't really have to worry about this being a bit of a springboard off the wrist. It just wraps quite nicely. And again, if you do have the option to put it on that beads of rice bracelet, where it's also going to drape beautifully. But of course, you have the choice in terms of comfort, in terms of usability. You're probably going to want to go with this really, really nice new FKM strap. And the nice thing is you do have drilled lugs, so if you're not using this strap, you can still get things exchanged very, very quickly. And the nice thing is both strap options come with quick release spring bars. You have quick release spring bars in this strap, as well as quick release spring bars in that beads of rice bracelet. So very, very cool, guys. I'm a big fan. I am a bracelet guy, but I am also a bit of a connoisseur when it comes to these types of straps. So with that said, let's get this off the wrist, set up for some Lume shots, the light transition, and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Very nice Lume, just like you would expect. The 3D Lume blocks definitely do their job. Bold in daylight and absolutely bold here in complete darkness. But one thing I always like to work in is going to be a bit of a low light transition, because you're always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. And as you guys can see here, this dial is essentially black when it doesn't have direct light on it. It's a really nice, versatile, deep blue. And that's kind of the way I will err in terms of like being on the side of safety. I would much rather have a watch, if it's a blue dial, for it to be a slightly too dark versus it being slightly too bright in terms of, you know, what's going to be able to complement, you know, what I'm wearing. And that's just, you know, some people don't care. Some people don't think about it. I do. I'm one of those people. I was in the Marine Corps for a long time. Guys, I was in uniforms. So now that I live my life out of uniform, I do, you know, like to coordinate a bit. And that's probably why I do enjoy a good strap pairing and kind of mixing things up here and there. But look at the glossiness and just the deep sheen on that dial. It's hard to capture, guys, but look at that. It gives it just a premium vibe, and it all flows. Again, the reflectiveness of that sapphire bezel insert as well. So it just gives it all a nice through line in terms of the overall thematic design. And if I wanted to, maybe I'll just give it a little supercharge here. And look at that, guys. It's just, it looks good. And I gotta say, I dig it. And then even you can see the way that Saffiano leather grain texturing that they've done on that FKM rubber really does a nice job of holding the light as well. Again, just giving you a little bit of a visual play without being too distracting. So that said, we'll get these lights back on here. You probably notice the camera as it's adjusting, it makes, you know, things seem a little bit brighter. And again, the nice thing is on the side of safety, it's going to be maybe slightly a tinge too dark. I don't mind it being a couple of levels too dark. And I've definitely been in times where I'm disappointed something just looks slightly too bright on my wrist. And so yeah, so this being very deep and dark is something that's been a real positive for me. So guys, closing thoughts on the wrist: classic proportions, fit most any situation, timeless design aesthetic. It's super versatile and is equally as wearable in terms of dimensions and proportions. Now, in terms of model variants, do check the site links for current options and availability. In terms of comparable models, a lot of vintage inspired divers out there, ranging from super affordable all the way up to genuine luxury. But Baltic has always done a good job of finding a bit of a sweet spot, offering independently desirable models that, while not necessarily being class leading spec wise, have still had strong enough specs to appeal to a broad demographic of collectors. So for me, guys, bottom line, although Baltic has already locked in a secure place within the enthusiast market, they do continue to iterate and improve models, an entire model lines in this, for example, where they're refining their brand to grow along with their customers' evolving needs. And I think that's good. So with that said, let me know what you all think down in the comments below. If you liked the video, please do a like. And if you're already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.